A brief biography of Kru Nick Sena, the founder of the art of Muay Sena. Read by artificial intelligence software. Kru Nicholas Anthony Sitward Sena, was born Thursday, February 23, 1984 in Southern California, United States of America. He was raised primarily in the Los Angeles area of California, most notably, Venice Beach. Nick's biological father went to prison when Nick was an infant. Nick's mother was unable to care for him on her own, so she asked her cousins to raise him. Nick spent the first 6 years of his life with the couple. Around the age of 6, the courts ordered Nick be returned to his mother and stepfather. It was around this time when Nick started manifesting behavioral problems. Nick was suspended and expelled from many schools for fighting and other destructive behaviors. Nick was having a hard time coping with all of the change and struggles of his young life. Around the age of 9, the child welfare system removed Nick from his mother's care and put him into McLaren Hall, which was a lockdown facility akin to an orphanage. Nick was returned to the custody of his mother around the age of 10, but his behaviors only became increasingly worse after his exposure to the juvenile delinquent environment of the child welfare system. Nick was placed into group homes at the age of 12. Nick spent most of his young life living on the streets in Los Angeles as he would run away from the group homes, which were horrible environments. Kru Nick began informal training in the arts of Muay Thai and Gracie, Brazilian, Jiu-Jitsu, around the age of 11. Because of the unstable nature of his life, his training was inconsistent and sporadic over the next few years. Despite this, Nick, who possesses a genius-level IQ of over 160, was able to learn and retain the techniques very rapidly and develop a comprehensive working understanding of the fundamentals, a fact that would keep him alive in the near future on a very regular basis. At the age of 13, Nick lost his way and began associating with the local street gang members in his tough neighborhood. He joined the gang and began delinquent activities. Of significant note is that the local outfit which granted Nick membership was an African-American organization known as the Crips. Nick became the only white member, a fact that would prove to be pivotal in his path and force him to develop his combat prowess to a high degree. At the age of 15, Nick was sent to prison for youths aged 25 and under, called the California Youth Authority. This draconian milieu, known as Gladiator School, is where Nick would commence serious development of his practical fighting skills on an almost daily basis over the next 3 years of his life. Because of the frequency of his fighting, much of his time was spent in solitary confinement, including being locked in the notorious dungeon of the Preston Castle for almost a year. Over this time in his life he engaged in over 100 real, potentially lethal fights, with every conceivable scenario being experienced. Some of the combat situations that Nick would encounter were fighting multiple opponents, fighting armed opponents, being ambushed, and often engaging opponents who were much larger and stronger than him. Nick soon gained a reputation amongst the populace of a battle-tested and unbeatable martial artist. This fact would often intensify and augment the frequency of people trying to make a name for themselves by attempting to attack, and on many occasions, murder him. Because of Nick's affiliation with a black gang, the other races and gangs oftentimes despised him and targeted him for attacks, only to be brutally lambasted by his street-style Muay Thai or have their limbs broken or be strangled into unconsciousness by his Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. Many times these vicious engagements would leave Nick's opponents on the brink of death. Because of the frequency and seriousness of these fights, Nick spent a significant amount of his time in solitary confinement. The black gang members also often felt compelled to test him. This dynamic stemmed from spite and deep-set insecurities held by the other gangsters. It is a common belief within the black subculture of Los Angeles that no white boy should be capable of beating a black man in a fight, a view which Nick commonly demonstrated was false. Shortly before his 18th birthday, Nick was released from the California Youth Authority. Unfortunately, Nick was on a path to a dark destiny as he soon fell back in with the wrong crowd of his old gang comrades. By the age of 19, Nick found himself in the notoriously dangerous Los Angeles County Jail facing a life sentence, and possibly the death penalty, for the gangland slaying of a rival gang member. The man Nick was accused of killing had murdered Nick's close friend only a week before meeting his own demise. Over the next 3 years of his life in the Los Angeles County Jail, Nick would experience unprecedented levels of violence. It was not uncommon for people to be stabbed or beaten to death in the jail. During his time in the jail, Nick engaged in over 100 life-or-death fights with hardened criminals and ruthless gang members. Nick's martial arts skills and vast combat experience would prove to be effective in keeping him alive. Much like his combat experiences in the California Youth Authority, the Los Angeles County Jail exposed Nick to many worst-case scenarios which he would not have survived if it had not been for his abilities. These experiences further developed and honed his combat prowess in the crucible of almost daily, potentially deadly engagements, sharpening and distilling his martial arts techniques to a razor's edge in a very specialized, non-sporting environment which survival demanded. In 2006, Nick was sentenced to 94 years and 3 life terms, making any prospect of freedom all but hopeless. Many years later, this virtual death sentence would be overturned by new youthful offender laws, something that Nick could not have known at that time. Nick was put on a bus and shipped off to a maximum security level 480 inches state prison, arguably the most perilous milieu on earth. By this time, a now 22-year-old Nick was realizing he had lost his way. He was beginning to become increasingly disenchanted and disillusioned with the gang lifestyle. He began to distance himself from his old gang and the politics of prison. Shortly after Nick made the decision to be his own man, 2 of the gangsters attempted a concerted attack on him in an armed ambush. This attempt to murder him was a response to Nick's no longer being a participant in the gang's activities. Nick expertly disarmed and dismantled the would-be assassins with a brutal series of elbows, knees and powerful slams to the ground in the narrow confines of a concrete hallway where they had attempted to ambush him. Ironically, Nick's brutal beating of the men who had attempted to murder him with prison-made knives resulted in him being charged with attempted murder. Nick found himself sitting in a tiny concrete room with only a toilet, sink, bed and mattress in the notorious, solitary confinement unit known as the SHU. Nick would end up spending the next 7 years of his life cut off from humanity in the abject pseudo-reality of solitary confinement. This experience of utter desolation was tantamount to torture and changed Nick in many ways, psychologically and emotionally. While most of the inmates who were placed in the SHU either lost their minds, or became even more criminally minded and violent, Nick used this time to develop himself. He dedicated himself to changing his path and devoted his mind, heart and organism to the righteous path of the practice and study of martial arts sciences and Thai, Theravada, Buddhism. Nick began intense daily physical training and assiduous academic studies of all things related to the martial arts sciences. Nick researched all things related to the martial arts as a field, studying every style he could find information on. Nick expended the most time and energy on a special focus of the study of Thai martial arts, as well as the history, culture, language and traditions of Thailand. Nick also began learning about the anatomy and physics of combat, as well as the psychological aspects of violent interactions. He commenced renewed interest in the teachings of the Buddha, which he had been introduced to early on in life. Nick began sharing his insights by instructing others who were interested in following a better path and changing their lives. In 2009, a Crips assassin armed with a large prison-made knife was sent into Nick's cell with orders to murder him for his disavowal in his gang ties, a violation of the gang code. The task went to a man called Monster. Monster was a man who was much larger than Nick and a purported expert in the art of Shaolin Kung Fu. The gang believed that the man, who was armed with a knife and to the outside observer, Nick's physical superior, would be successful in ending Nick's existence. Nick utilized his training and skills to defend his life, incorporating the practical experience in fighting opponents armed with prison-made knives. Within seconds and with less than 10 strikes thrown, the Crips assassin was lying supine on the cold prison floor. Nick fortunately survived the Crips' attempt to take his life. However, his assailant was not as fortunate, as he did not survive the engagement. Nick's unavoidable defense of his life, which resulted in tragedy, would have a potentially tragic consequence for Nick himself. Nick once again found himself fighting for his life in a courtroom, facing death at the hands of an apathetic and broken justice system. If Nick hadn't protected his life, he'd be but a memory, and the assassin would be sitting in the courtroom facing charges of murdering Nick. After fighting the trumped-up and unfounded charges to no avail for over 4 years, in 2013, Nick was finally released from the SHU. Nick had endured 7 years of being excommunicated and almost completely deprived of human contact. Nick and now had an opportunity to access to the world, a basic human right which was denied to him for so many years of his life. Nick promptly contacted Grandmaster Rorion Gracie, the visionary founder of the UFC and avant-garde who introduced Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to the world. Nick explained the circumstances of the incident and requested Rorion's expert testimony and opinion of his non-culpability in the matter. After several conversations with Nick and his then-fiancée, Grandmaster Rorion, whose expertise is unrivaled when it comes to reality of combat as the eldest son of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu co-founder Helio Gracie, and a 9th-degree red belt, Rorion agreed to support Nick by coming to court to testify on his behalf that Nick's actions, while unfortunate and imperfect, were in no way malicious or excessive. Upon learning of the Grandmaster's intent to join Nick's defense team, the deputy district attorney immediately ceded and offered Nick a plea deal. The agreement would be as follows: if Nick pleaded no contest to voluntary manslaughter, he would receive a 9-year sentence. Nick's life experience had taught him that all things are uncertain, or as his studies of Buddhism had taught him, me eine or anicca. Despite his innocence of the charges, which were murder, Nick agreed to the plea deal rather than risk his very life on a jury's whims. Grandmaster Rorion, in effect, saved Nick's life by his support. Nick continues to receive mentorship from his Jiu-Jitsu Grandmaster. In 2012, after 6 years of renewed dedicated practice and study of the martial arts sciences as well as Thai Buddhism, Kru Nick had radically transformed not just his level of physical prowess and academic knowledge of their martial arts, but more importantly his heart and mind. It was at this point in his life that he realized the powerful redemptive qualities that their practice of martial arts possessed. He had experienced firsthand the human being's ability to transcend past mistakes and unskillful ways of thought, speech and action. It was at this time in his life that Nick began to feel a strong compulsion to share his insights with others. His singular journey, he realized, had the potential to change the lives of many others and prevent them from losing their way in the manner which he had. Nick decided to codify his knowledge and experience of real combat as well as methods and principles of self-actualization. Nick would coin his art Muay Sena in honor of its Thai roots and inspiration, along with his name, which incidentally means warriors in Sanskrit as well as the Thai language. This warrior's boxing was to be a system designed to not only survive combat but more importantly to thrive and grow as a human being. Muay Sena was not to be an art intended for the destruction of others, but instead the destruction of one's own unwise conditionings of interacting with the world. The system teaches not just the skills for addressing violent interpersonal conflict, but skills which facilitate the realization and development of the human being's potential for morality, stability of heart and mind and wisdom. These are the 3 skills which one seeks to develop in the Buddhist education system. They are known in the Pali language as Sila, Samadhi and Panna. Kru Nick's objective his teachings was to develop human beings with the characteristics of an architect, rather than those of the demolitionist. In late 2012, while still in the SHU, Nick met a girl who would prove to be influential on his path, catalyzing his eventual understanding of the Buddhist concept of anicca terms of human relationships. The girl was a young Dutch fashion model and actress living on the Spanish resort island of Mallorca. Nick was skeptical to begin with, as he had had past experiences with women not following through with their words. Nevertheless, he remained open-minded and corresponded with her without reserve and began forming a strong bond. The girl was intelligent, loving, classy, dedicated and supportive, attributes that he valued greatly in a woman. Nick and the Dutch girl fell in love, and she expressed a desire to be married, a sentiment which Nick had reservations about but was willing to explore. She became the most important person in Nick's life, becoming his best friend, business partner and later, fiancé. Nick's fiancé went about creating a website and publishing Nick's vast body of work, helping him realize his visions, and began preparing his books to be published. The Dutch girl then reached out to the people that Nick respected most in the world of the martial arts sciences and began laying their foundations for relationships that Nick then cultivated. In late 2013, Nick's fiancée traveled from Europe to California to visit Nick in prison for a month. This beautiful gesture and demonstration of her seriousness and devotion was something that Nick truly appreciated. This action reinforced Nick's trust and love for the girl. However, this belief was soon to be undermined, taking him by surprise. After almost 2 years with the Dutch girl by his side, she lost her resolve and disappeared completely. As fate would have it, Nick would never speak to the girl again, save for a Dear John letter which he received months after her silence began. Nick had placed his trust in the girl and planned a life around their relationship, as the girl had made promises of a lifetime together, a family, and even had gotten his name tattooed on her. Nick found it extremely difficult to accept such a shocking betrayal of his love and trust. He tried diligently to reconcile with his fiancée, consistently attempting to communicate with her, all to no avail. This experience taught Nick very valuable lessons in life and changed him for the better, seeing how fragile the heart and mind can be and how uncertain life and relationships are. Despite having lived a consistently difficult and traumatic life, this was one of the most difficult experiences of Nick's life. It compelled him to examine himself and the entire concept of love and relationships, and the nature of reality itself. He made the determination that he would develop his skills of understanding of self and others and becoming a better man and avoiding such errors in the future. Realizing that he had overestimated his own understanding of others, Nick began endeavoring to develop his wisdom through his Buddhist studies. While Nick had, for years, studied various forms of Buddhism, he would now find a tradition and teacher which truly spoke to his experiences and understanding of the Dhamma. Nick began to study their teachings of the great Tyrant Master, Ajahn Chah Subuto, through his most senior Western disciples' teachings. Most notable of these great monks who influenced and taught Nick, through both direct and indirect means, are Luang Por's Kamadamo, Gyasaro, Amaro, Pasano, and Samidho. Nick put the teachings into practice and began putting forth effort into his morality, mental cultivation, and wisdom development, or sila, samadhi and panna. He taught himself the basic Pali terms which gave him insights into the Thai language and the concepts of Theravada Buddhism. In late 2013, Nick had the great fortune and honor to meet the man who would become his mentor and something of a father figure to him, Muay Thai Baran's pioneering Grandmaster Chinawat Woody Sirisan. Grandmaster Woody, arguably the most influential and important man in the world of Muay Thai Baran today, is the chairman of the Kru Muay Thai Association, president of World Muay Baran Federation and World Muay Thai Organization, amongst other responsibilities. He is one of the pioneers who introduced Muay Thai to Europe and the Middle East. Nick's fiancée reached out to Grandmaster Woody and told him about Nick's life story, sending him videos of Nick demonstrating his abilities of Muay Thai and excerpts of the books Nick was writing on martial arts as well as his memoirs. Grandmaster Woody began communicating with Nick regularly, providing him not only with knowledge of Muay Thai but more importantly, inspiration and support in Nick's journey on the right path. After about 6 months of consistent interaction with Nick, Grandmaster Woody awarded him with the rank of Khan 10, the equivalent of a black belt in other martial arts. This was Nick's greatest achievement and honor in his life to that point and gave him great motivation to do right by his Grandmaster and himself. Nick continued learning more about the ancient traditional martial art of Muay Thai from his Brahmajan, Woody and other Grandmasters. Whereas before Grandmaster Woody's influence he'd only been proficient and knowledgeable in the modern sport-based techniques of Muay Thai as applied to combat of a non-sporting nature, Nick was now learning about an art that very few people in the world are knowledgeable in. In 2016, following 2 years of study and practice the ancient teachings under Grandmaster Woody's auspices, he awarded Nick with the rank of Khan 11 and the title of Pukwai Kru or Assistant Teacher, Master. Grandmaster Woody instructed Nick to develop not just his physical skills, as those were proficient, but more importantly, his heart and mind, setting himself on the right path. This directive set Nick in motion and he began teaching himself many topics with his Grandmaster's feedback. He taught himself to read and write Thai script and the Thai terms for the entire curriculum of Muay Thai. He brought his knowledge of technical Thai terms to a comprehensive level, revisited the Remarkian epic and Sanskrit studies to better understand the roots of the techniques and terminologies. He also redoubled his efforts to purify his mind and avoid unskillful thought, speech, and action. Nick began actively seeking opportunities to follow his Grandmaster's constant reminders to right himself and make merit, a catch-all phrase which means to do good deeds, which is known in the Thai language as tam bun. This wise advice inspired Nick to undertake philanthropic endeavors from daily acts of kindness to contributions to hospitals for ill children whose families cannot afford pay medical bills. In 2017 Grandmaster Woody awarded Nick with the rank of Khan 12 and the title of Kru Muay Thai. This title is derived from the Sanskrit word guru, a term which many are familiar with. In the martial art of Muay Thai the title signifies a fully qualified teacher, master. This honor distinguished Nick as an internationally recognized member of the most prestigious Muay Thai institution on earth, the Kru Master Muay Thai Association. This great achievement had only been bestowed upon 3 other Americans in history at that time in the traditional martial art of Muay Thai. This great responsibility instilled Nick with a sense of urgency in his desire to contribute to the art and people who have done so much to change his heart and mind, particularly his Brahmajan, Grandmaster Woody. Rather than feeling as though he had made it and had nothing more to learn, Nick realized he still had much more to learn and once again was inspired by his Brahmajan to dedicate himself to reaching new heights not only in his practice and study of Muay Thai but as a human being. These mastery experiences of self-actualization propelled Kru Nick to pursue a greater cause and contribute to the art and humanity in ways he previously couldn't even imagine. Kru Nick has had obstacles not only related to the restrictive nature of him being in prison but also of his organism itself. In early 2016 Nick completely ruptured his left Achilles tendon while practicing the Hanuman Tayan, flying knee, technique. Nick underwent an immediate surgical repair and could not walk for 2 months, but, thanks to his extensive study of sports medicine and physical therapy, he was able to fully rehabilitate himself on his own, in 6 months' time. In early 2019 Nick completely ruptured his other Achilles tendon. This time it was the right calcaneo tendon which he tore while training a particularly demanding variation of Praramya Blanca, climbing circular kick, in which one rappels off of a wall, and delivers the shin strike. Kru Nick had surgical repair and again has utilized his expertise to rehabilitate himself to a good measure. While Nick was sentenced to 94 years to life, a recently passed law in California has all but guaranteed him a path to freedom. Because Nick was only a teenager at the time of the crime he was accused of, The youthful offender law states that he may be released as early as 2022. This light at the end of the tunnel has compelled Nick to focus himself on laying a foundation for his life after prison. Kru Nick has written the textbook on the codifications of Muay Sena, his personal system of martial arts sciences and self-actualization. Excerpts from the book can be found on this website. Kru Nick has also written a book on the traditional martial art of Muay Thai Buran, or ancient Thai boxing, with the blessings of his Grand Master Woody. Excerpt chapters from this book can be found on this website as well. Kru Nick is also putting the finishing touches on his memoirs, which are entitled, Blessed with Venom, Memoirs of Urban Warrior. Kru Nick has written about his life in hopes of inspiring others to avoid making the same mistakes his youth. Kru Nick has written a collaborative 2-volume comprehensive work on the legendary Prajau Siwa, Tiger King style of Muay Buran with Muay Thai master and published author Ajahn Stuart Hurst of the UK. The books feature an in-depth look into the Tiger King style of Muay Buran. Volumes 1 and 2 are available to order on Amazon. Kru Nick was given the great honor to team up with his Grandmaster Chinawat Woody Sirisan in donating a 2-man team of Royal Inner Palace Guardian Warrior statues. The statues represent an ancient institution of elite Royal Inner Palace guards that were led by the Tiger King himself. The guards specialized in unarmed combat due to the weapons ban inside of the palace complex, and they were trained to defend the royal family while inside of their palace from all kinds of attacks using only the weapons of their body. These specially selected and highly trained warriors are called Tanaliawak, in the Thai language. In the honor of a lifetime, Kru Nick was allowed the privilege of donating one of these statues to the Tiger King's Royal Monastery Complex Wat Tug, in the ancient capital of Ayutthaya, making him the first foreigner ever allowed to do so. Somj Prasanfetate is commonly known in the Thai language as Prajau Siwa, meaning the Tiger King. He was the 29th king of Ayutthaya who reigned over the kingdom more than 300 years ago. The significance of this historic figure is the fact that he is the founder of the eponymous system of Muay Thai Buran, which Kru Nick has studied and practiced at great length with the guidance of Grandmaster Woody. Kru Nick and his Grandmaster Woody once again partnered to donate 2 more statues to Wat Tug, the royal temple complex of Prajau Siwa in Ayutthaya. This time Grandmaster Woody sponsored a statue of the Tiger King himself, while Kru Nick dedicated a statue of one of the Tiger King's most loyal and trusted warriors, Pantinarasing, a symbol of honesty in Thailand. Pantinarasing was the navigator of the royal barge Kachai and a warrior close to the Tiger King of Ayutthaya. He chose a dangerous canal path to protect the Tiger King from assassins, causing the boat's figurehead to be damaged by a tree. Despite being pardoned by the Tiger King, Pantinarasing accepted the penalty of execution for this well-intentioned act. Initially, the Tiger King ordered that a statue be made and the head be decapitated, representing execution in effigy. Pantinarasing pleaded with the Tiger King to carry out his execution in order to maintain the ancient royal tradition, an act of bravery and loyalty which cemented him in the annals of Thai history. Kru Nick actively teaches the martial arts sciences, as well as the Dhamma, the Buddhist education system. He does the former only after carefully observing the potential student's character and assessing their level of maturity, morality, intentions and respect for self and others. Over the years, Kru Nick has trained dozens of individuals in the martial arts sciences to varying degrees and has introduced countless others to the teachings of the Buddha. Over the years, his experiences in prison have taught him that it is an environment that is non-conducive to growth in the martial arts from a teaching standpoint. As such, he has moved away from the physical techniques and focused on the heart. Rather than being a teacher of fighting, he has decided it is more valuable to teach people about their hearts. He continues to learn from his Grandmaster Woody as well as other great Grandmasters of Muay Thai Buran from both Thailand and Europe. Be like a lotus which is not contaminated.